Welcome to the third of 5 short videos about how to find, browse, and search historical newspapers from Kingston and Frontenac County. I'm Jo Stanbridge, and I'm the local history and genealogy librarian at Kingston-Frontenac Public Library in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Today I'm going to show you a powerful tool for digging into the Kingston newspapers from the earliest date range, 1810 to 1849. Our library's local history room is located on the second floor of the central branch at 130 Johnson Street in Kingston. In the previous 2 videos, we talked about the library's collection of historical Kingston newspapers, that is, the Kingston Whig Standard and its predecessors, the British Whig, Kingston Chronicle and Gazette, and so on. Our microfilm collection includes a full run of those newspapers from 1810 until the present, and you can learn more in the first video, How to Browse All Dates. In the second video, we showed you how to find and search more than 100 years worth of Kingston newspapers online, and that video covered the newspapers from 1810 to 1926. You'll find links to both videos in the description box below. The newspaper index I'm going to show you today is found on our Digital Kingston site. To get there, we'll start as we did in the previous video by visiting the library's website at www.kfpl.ca. In the left-hand menu, choose Online Resources and Recommendations, then Local History and Genealogy, then Digital Kingston. There's a lot to explore in the Digital Kingston site, but today we'll go straight to the newspapers. They're located under the Research tab in the list of resources on the left side of your screen. If you click the down-facing arrow next to the word Newspapers, you can choose the date range you want to explore. Each needs to be searched in a different way. Today I want to show you a subset of the date range 1810 to 1926. We'll talk about how to search the very earliest newspapers, and then I'll give you 4 tips for even better results. In the previous video, we talked about how you can search and browse this whole date range by visiting the Our Ontario website. And it's always good to start with that strategy because when it works, it really works well, especially in the later part of that date range, say from 1900 to 1926. But what about the earliest newspapers? Keyword searches in those can be challenging. For one thing, the print tends to be smaller and more crowded on the page, and many of the pages were faded or damaged even before they were microfilmed, so the subsequent scans may be blurry or hard to read. If you've tried to search those earliest newspapers by keyword, you know that the results can be hit and miss. So is there anything you can do if your initial search isn't working? Well, yes, thanks to the work of volunteers in the years before digitization, the earliest years of the Kingston newspapers were indexed by hand. The volunteers went through the newspapers, assigned subject headings to the various articles, and typed the information onto index cards. It was painstaking and valuable work. This card set lists articles in which the name Chauncey Bugby appears. The card index covered the newspapers from 1810 to 1849. Longtime visitors to the Central Branch may remember this card file, which used to occupy a back wall near the microfilm reader. Since then, every card has been scanned and digitized into a database, and now you can browse and search the cards from home through the Digital Kingston site. This little paragraph tells you how. Click the Indexes tab at the top of the screen. It's right here. In the left-hand navigation pane, you'll see indexes to a few different resources, and here are the historic Kingston newspapers. Click Search the Index. The search screen looks like this. There are options to limit the date range of your search or to search only by title or subject, but in most cases it's best to keep things simple. So start with a broad search and you can narrow it later if necessary. Let's search for those articles about Chauncey Bugby. Keeping it simple, we'll just type his surname and click Search. At first it might seem as if nothing has happened, and that's because your search results have appeared below the search pane, and depending on your browser settings, this might mean that they're not immediately visible on your screen, so you have to scroll down. Here are the 3 articles about Chauncey Bugby that were listed on the typewritten cards from the card file. Let's look at this one. It's tempting to click on his name because it's larger and it appears at the top of the entry, but resist the urge, because if you click his name, you'll just get the list of search results that you've already seen. So click on the link below the source note and it will take you to the correct issue of the newspaper. Again, it's tempting to type into this Google search box. I mean, it would be logical to assume that this would find Chauncey Bugby's name on the newspaper page. But unfortunately, Google doesn't perform keyword searches on these newspapers, and that search box will take you away from the Kingston newspapers into other resources or websites. Since we're looking for his name in this particular issue of this newspaper, we won't type in the box. Instead, we'll use the page and column information from that index card entry. First, we need to make sure we're on the correct page of the newspaper. When the newspapers were scanned, the pages weren't always filmed in order. So, for example, Google might label an image as page 1, when in fact it was page 3 of the actual newspaper, so just watch out for that. You can see how much text is on each page, and it's really helpful to have that column number. In this little inset window, we can slide the purple box to zoom in on column 6. Here's the list of prisoners who were captured at the Battle of Windmill Point, and here's the name of Chauncey Bugby. Later, he was transported to Tasmania and raised a family there, and there's a wonderful article about him in a 2014 issue of Thousand Islands Life, if you're interested. So, we've seen how to search the newspaper card index using the Digital Kingston database, but before I go, I'd like to give you 4 tips to make your searching easier. The first tip is about the index entries that say letter at the post office. There are many of these entries. In those days, the mail wasn't delivered to your home. You would pick it up at the post office when you went to town. The newspaper regularly published a list of people who had letters waiting for them at the post office, and those names were collected into the newspaper card index. So you'll see lots of them in the Digital Kingston database. The lists can be useful because they can help researchers confirm that a certain person was in the area around the time that the notice was published. But when you're looking at a list of search results, it's good to know that the ones for letter at the post office refer to a list of names and not an article about the person, and sadly, no information about what the letter was about. My second tip is about OCR errors and what to do about them. OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition, which is how printed text gets read by a machine and converted into data that you can search on your computer. If the print is blurry or faded, sometimes the machine transcribes it wrong, so the abbreviation JAN for January might appear as JUN for June, or TUES for Tuesday might appear as THURS for Thursday. In this entry about Thomas Aylwin's election to the riding of Portneuf, the source note says the article appeared on May 20th and 24th, 1841. But then it says that no copies of that newspaper are available. This is a red flag. You might want to investigate a possible OCR error. I'm going to tell you about 2 workarounds for this. We're still working on the first one, so at the moment it's only a partial workaround, but it will improve over time. We're uploading images of all the scanned index cards to Digital Kingston, so you'll be able to browse them if you suspect an OCR error. Here's how to find them. On the top toolbar, click the Collections tab. Then click All Collections. The scanned index cards are here. Note that the work is still in progress. The cards are being uploaded in alphabetical order, and at the time this video is being recorded, only the A and B drawers have been uploaded. Let's look for the card about Thomas Aylwin's election in Portneuf. This batch of index cards covers the alphabet from AUCT to BAIN. The cards are in the form of a PDF document, and we can either browse or keyword search it. I can type his name into the search box and click Go. An orange pointer appears at the bottom of the screen. To jump to that card, I can click on the orange pointer. Here's the card about Thomas Aylwin. If you look closely, you can see that the typewritten text says the Portneuf article appeared in March, not May. So you'll want to be alert for these possible OCR errors when working with the early newspapers and also with the typewritten card index. So now we know the correct date of the newspaper article about Thomas Aylwin, but how can we find it? And what can we do if we suspect an OCR error on a card that hasn't yet been made browsable, as in tip 2? This brings us to the third of my 4 tips: browse the scanned newspapers. Even if you haven't seen the index card with your own eyes, you can often make an educated guess about the cause of an OCR error. For example, if the computer says an article appeared on June 20th, but no paper was published because that was a Sunday, you could try browsing the January 20th issue instead. We covered this in tutorial part 1, but here's a quick refresher. You can browse the newspapers from this date range online. At the top of the Digital Kingston page, click the Research tab. In the left-hand menu, click Newspapers, and then click Browse All by Date. Scroll down. Each link will take you to the newspaper for a particular year. In this case, we're looking for the 1841 Kingston Chronicle and Gazette. Here it is. And here's the March 24th newspaper. On page 3, column 4, we find his name. So browsing the newspapers online is much the same as browsing them on microfilm. Sometimes people ask whether the microfilm version would be clearer or easier to read, and unfortunately, the answer is almost always no. In fact, the newspapers that are online were scanned from our microfilm reels. This means that if the text is blurry online, it will be just as blurry on microfilm. Luckily, the vast majority of the newspapers are very readable online, so we're grateful for that. My fourth and final tip is about the contents of the card index. It doesn't include birth, marriage, or death notices, what genealogists sometimes call BMDs. When the typewritten card index was created, the decision was made to skip paid content, such as advertisements and paid notices like BMDs, and focus on articles. You may find some reports of births, marriages, or deaths, but these usually involve a prominent member of the community. They were treated as news items rather than paid notices. The best option, if you're looking for these types of notices, is to find the date of birth, marriage, or death in some other way, and then browse the newspapers by date. For example, you might be able to find a church baptism, marriage, or burial record. But I have one more suggestion for you, and it's well worth checking. The early Ontario newspaper transcriptions are printed books that include birth, marriage, and death notices from early newspapers, including the early Kingston papers. The books are not available online, but you can consult them in the genealogy section of the local history room. To find the call number, just search Ontario Newspaper Transcription in the library catalog. This series includes transcriptions from many Ontario newspapers. The Kingston ones are in the Frontenac County volumes, and you can see the abbreviation FRON for Frontenac in their call numbers. The Frontenac County volumes cover Kingston newspapers from 1819 to 1851. As you can see, there are 2 bound volumes and a ring binder. Each of these contains a number of smaller books collected together. Here's the title page from one of the smaller books. And each book contains an alphabetical index of surnames. Here's what a page of transcriptions looks like. These volumes contain just the birth, marriage, and death notices, not the general news items from the newspapers. We're grateful to the Kingston Branch OGS for making these available in their collection, along with so many other valuable resources at our library. We've covered a lot in this video. We focused on the typewritten card index to the earliest Kingston newspapers, and we talked about how to search that index on the Digital Kingston site, and then we raced through 4 tips for more effective searching. So by now you know that there are several ways to search and browse the Kingston newspapers up to the year 1926. But how can you access the more recent newspapers? This will be the subject of our next video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me through the contact form on the library's website at www.kfpl.ca. Thanks again, good luck with your research, and have fun exploring the newspapers online.